Welcome everyone. Let's begin our lesson for today by going over the learning goals and success criteria. First, what are we learning? We're learning how to determine whether a function is positive or negative. How are we learning it? Through the intervals of functions part 2 notes and the intervals of functions part 2 assignment. When can we use this information? To examine financial statements for businesses to determine times of profits and times of debt. How do we know we learned it? By getting a score of 4 on the intervals of functions part 2 assignment. Now let's take a look at our agenda for today. We will begin by going over the learning goals and success criteria. While we do that, you'll fill out your Get It Started. Once you've completed your Get It Started, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. After that, we'll go over the intervals of functions part 2 notes, and then I'll give you time to complete the intervals of functions part 2 assignment on Desmos. Once you've completed the assignment, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. At the end of class, we'll go back over our learning goals and success criteria while you fill out your Before You Go. Your only homework for tonight is to continue working on the reasoning with features of function study guide and any incomplete assignments that you may have. Let's take a look now at the intervals of functions part 2 notes. The notes begin with the learning goals and success criteria. Now let's talk about positive and negative functions, and we're not really talking about positive and negative functions as a whole. We're talking about the intervals where these things occur. So functions are said to be positive on a given interval when the range of the function, or the y values, is above the x-axis. So when the graph is showing above the x-axis, that's where the function is positive. Now they're negative on a given interval when the range is below the x-axis. So what does this look like? Well, we have a graph here, and notice my graph goes here, it passes through the x-axis, comes down, starts to come back up, changes again and becomes above the x-axis. So in this case, we would say that the positive intervals are the green sections. So here, the graph is above. Even though it's going downward, it's still above the x-axis. So up until this point right here, it's positive. Then once it hits this point, it starts to become negative all the way until it hits this point again. Once it hits this point, now it's positive again. The purple area would be considered the negative intervals, where it goes below the x-axis. So even though right here it changes direction and starts going back up, it's still negative until it reaches this point where it actually crosses the x-axis and starts to work above. So now how do we determine where an interval is positive and negative? Well, if we look at this graph here, we have a graph where it is negative here all the way from negative infinity all the way up until it gets to negative 4. And then it becomes positive after that. Now, over on this side, we have it being negative from negative 2 all the way until this point here. We'll call it negative 1. It may not be exactly negative 1, but it's close. So it's negative from negative infinity to negative 4. And then from negative 2 to negative 1. And then it becomes positive from negative 4 to negative 2, and from negative 1 to positive infinity. So that's how we can use graphs to determine the intervals on which a function is positive or negative. Let's talk now about how to sign in to Desmos to complete your work. So what we're going to do is you're going to click on the link to go to the assignment, and it should take you to a page that looks kind of like this. And right here where it says sign in with Google, we're going to click there. And it's going to pop up with our email accounts. You're going to click on your school email account. And it should already have you logged in because you should have already been logged in using Google Classroom. From there, I'm just going to click start the activity, and it will take me into the assignment and allow me to begin. So that's how you will log in to Desmos using Google. Let's take a look now at the intervals of functions part 2 assignment. The assignment begins with the learning goals and success criteria. If we scroll down, there's a link here to take you to the Desmos activity. Go ahead and click on that link, and it should take you to a page that looks like this. We'll go ahead and click start the activity. The assignment begins with the learning goals and success criteria. We'll go ahead and click next. Now it says state if possible the intervals where the function is positive and where it is negative. So here, where is it positive? Well, it's positive from negative infinity all the way to 0. So we're going to put that in interval form. So this is from negative infinity to 0. It's positive. And then again here from e, right? That's the value from e to infinity. So e to infinity. And notice this time there's a solid dot here. So this is actually included in the set. So e has a bracket and infinity has a parenthesis. So that's where it's positive. Now it's negative here from 0 to e. And e is not included in the set because there's a hole there. So this would be our interval. Now you'll do the same thing for this one. And then click next. Now this one asks us to sketch a graph again. So it says the domain is from negative infinity to positive infinity, meaning it's going to go all the way across. And the range is negative infinity to positive infinity. So it's going to go all the way up and down as well. It has a y-intercept at y equals negative 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put a point there at y equals negative 2. And has x-intercepts at x equals negative 3. So I put a point there. And an x-intercept at x equals 4. So right there. The function is negative on negative 3 to 4. So from negative 3 to 4, it's going to be negative. So it's going to come down, pass through this point here, and then back up. And from 4 to infinity, it's negative. So it's going to hit here and bounce and come back down. And it's positive from negative infinity to negative 3. So it's positive on this side. So it should look something like this. So now we go from infinity to negative infinity, both in the range and the domain. And then when you're done with this activity, you'll go ahead and go back to your Google form and click next. This will take you to your before you go. Go ahead and fill out your before you go and then submit your work on Google Classroom.